The Three Blind Mice Gaslands group is having a scratch-scrap post-apocalyptic build. In other words, you couldn't use any 3D printed parts, and you had to use scraps from other castings or junk you had around or scraps. So anyhow, I apologize for this being a very long video, and I did have to accelerate a lot of portions of it. So we'll get through it here. I'll try to explain what I'm doing, but it may go by quickly. I started off with the Toro Loco casting by Hot Wheels. I loved it because it had the horns, and it was jacked up. I got rid of the big wheels that were on it. I didn't like them because they were just too darn big, and I kind of knew what I had in mind. And this thing was pretty play-worn. The wheels were sloppy. They, would go all over the place. So one of the things, an example of what you couldn't do on this, I wanted to use green light wheels. I had green light wheels that would have worked on this, but those are aftermarket parts. Those aren't allowed. So I found this Tonka with wheels just right. So I ended up using those wheels on this casting. I had a heck of a time getting them off the axle. I ended up kind of cutting them, cutting the casting. You'll see here how I ended up trying to get them out of there. And one of the tricks I've learned is if I put plastic weld around the axle, it softens the plastic. This is MEK, or M-E-K, so I probably should be wearing gloves when I use this, but I'm not. But it softens the plastic just enough, and then you can get the wheels off of there. I've done that before, and it worked out pretty well. I ended up using that tubing for the axle instead. And again, the axles were just sloppy on there before. And so I like the look of that. And then, well, yeah, I took this matchbox and I wanted the plow off of it. And to give you an idea what I had in mind, you're going to see me put guns and a flamethrower on this casting, but that's not what this guy likes to do who drives this. This guy's more into running things over, just kind of plowing through them. And yeah, if he has to use his guns and if he has to use his flamethrower, he will. But it's not because he wants to. And you'll see more about that later, especially if you hang around for the whole video. As you can see here, I have greatly accelerated some of the chunks. Again, there's a lot going on this. If there's any section on here that you see that you'd like to see more of the detail on, not sped up, or I did cut chunks out of some of these sections as well, let me know. And I could always do like a real short YouTube video of just say a chunk or two dealing with specific things. Just let me know. You will see me do a lot of these parts where I tack them on, like in this case with the plow. And there I was just using, I wanted to get the elevation right. I wanted the plow low, but I wanted it to clear the ground. I didn't want it to drag. And so I was just using that plastic as just to elevate the plow a little bit so I'd have enough spacing under it. And you will see me, as I was about to say, tack things with CA glue. And then what I do later is go over it with, oh yeah, my favorite, JB Weld. What I'm doing here, I had some square tubing, and because of how I'm doing the axles, I needed to make a shield for the axle. So I took the square tubing, cut it to length, cut it in half, and then I put that over where the axles will go through, again to create a little shield for the axle. And again, I will tack this with CA glue. And then what I do is I go over it all later with JB Weld. And so that channel is in there for the axle to fit through, if that makes sense. It's just to protect the axle so that it doesn't, so that it has a path, so that it's free rolling. Again, there's a lot to this video going on. It rolls great, in case you're curious. You see the axles are kind of snug there, and I kind of tap them through because I JB welded around them. You know, I put them in place, JB welded around them, and then, because remember I said they were sloppy, and then I drilled them out just slightly so that they'd roll. Something else I wanted on this in the back. Like I said, this guy likes to run things down, forward or reverse. So here I'm scratch building the back bumper, and I'm just using styrene for this chunk, and then I had some square tubing, metal tubing here, as you can see. I think it's aluminum tubing. You see me with two chunks. The bottom one, again, is just for this, just for placement as I glue it to get the height that I wanted. And again, I just use plastic, I use some styrene chunks, I'll use whatever's around to just get the right elevation when I'm gluing these things. And at this point, this casting was weird. That little body just, it never wanted to sit quite right, straightness-wise. It always wanted to twist a little. And I think that's because of the play wear. I think some kid just beat the ever-loving hell out of this thing. God bless him, he had fun with it. And as I will remind you later, these are toys. Let's have fun with them. So, yeah, got out the JB Weld. End up going over all of those pieces where they're held down with the JB Weld. And you may notice that square tubing, yeah, there you go. I had to fill in the ends of that. And that, what's JB Weld for, if not for that kind of thing? One thing I didn't do on this, I did not put any kind of windshield or grating or bars or anything like that across the windshield, because this guy's so high up the ground, he doesn't need it. There's nothing going to be hitting his windshield, so he's fine without it. Now, the Toro Loco has nostrils. It's a bull. So what would be better than drilling out those nostrils and putting a couple guns in there? Up at the right, you can see kind of my scrap pile. There's chunks from other builds. There's model parts in there. There's all kinds of junk in there. So there's the initial tubing that I put on there. And I was, all along the way, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I had these lights off of another build. So I thought, well, I'll just cut those off and stick those under the front. The funny thing about it is after I attached these, I realized that, and I shouldn't tell you because you might not realize it, but they're actually facing the wrong direction when I look at them. It's almost as if they were designed, I have them facing, where they normally would face forward, I have facing towards the sky. And so the part I actually treat as the headlight is actually the side of the light. But we won't tell anybody that. And again, I use JB Weld to hold this in place. And again, I tack it in place with the CA glue. It works out wonderfully. There you see the Tonka wheels, but you see the Tonka writing on the side of the wheels. That has to go, but that is easily sanded off. And if they're a little rough, even better. And then I CA those axles into them. And again, I just use the brass tubing for the axles. Throw those on there, make sure it rolls. And then it's on to some detail painting. And so this did have the engine in the back. I thought about cutting that engine out, putting some oversized engine in there, but I looked at different things and they weren't going to work the way I wanted them to. They were going to screw up the look of the casting. So I ended up sticking with that. And then I decided I wanted the back bumper. In a sick way, I wanted it to look like caution tape, the coloring of like caution tape. As if this guy really wants you to be aware that he's about to run you down. But I like how it turned out. I mean, it added some color to the casting as well. And all I ended up doing on that was taking some yellow paint, using a sponge. I didn't want it to look too crisp. And that's one of the things on the Gaslands, the post-apocalyptic builds, is I think you're trying to stay away in a lot of ways from crispness. Not to say that you can't, paint them that way to start off with, and then deaden them in a way with the weathering. And I've done that before with a lot of guns and a lot of detail. I'll paint it really crisp and then I'll use washes to hide it. You may recall on the Mortician build I did recently, I really liked when I did the olive green wheels. And here I am again doing the olive green wheels. It's a good look to me. It gives it a separation from the black of the wheel. It gives it a military look. And I actually end up going with an olive green color for the casting itself when I paint it. But again, now it's time, fortunately for me, the Toro Loco has a wonderfully detailed grill, support system, whatever you want to call it, inside the framework. As you see, it's a separate piece that fits on there. It actually it's tough to put on because it fits over the exhaust of the engine and it's kind of tricky. But that, to me, it was kind of like, hey, stop there. But I wanted to put a flamethrower on the back, and I had actually made one before, and the tubing was a little too big. It didn't look right, so I used smaller brass tubing and a rod to look like the igniter for the flamethrower. And then I just used this resin pin. I got it in place, threw some resin on it, and then just shine the light. And that fixed it in place. Using the resin glue out of these pins is really handy sometimes. I was having a really hard time for some reason trying to use CA glue for that. And it just worked. The resin worked. And then for fun, I thought, well, I want it to be steel horns. I want them to look like somebody made this out of just some, sheets of steel or whatever they had around the shop. And so I used Rub and Buff to give it the metal look. And again, I used Rub and Buff recently on a Twin Mill 3 that I was customizing. I was thrilled with how it worked. And again, once you hit this with a clear coat, I went over this with the Minwax. I believe it was satin, the clear satin that I used on this. Once I was through with the Rub and Buff, to seal that Rub and Buff in. And it works wonderfully. You know, so once it's sealed, you're perfectly fine. There's no problems with it. That orange had to go, and I thought brown would be a good look for that. And then more of the scrap building. I have chunks off of an old motherboard. You know, I tear everything apart. I don't just throw things away. I tear everything apart. And there's some chunks. So there's some standoffs over to the left that I just set aside. And there's this little, I forget what they're called. They run wire through it. And I think it's like to block frequencies or something through the wire is why that metal is around it. But I like the look of it. So I thought these little standoffs would make perfect canisters to feed the flamethrower. And as far as that other piece that I end up using, I dropped that piece in the middle, which, yeah. You know how it goes with the small stuff. You fumble around a little bit. That other piece, though, that I end up throwing on that framework above the engine area, I just wanted something to fill that in. That piece seemed to fill it well. As to its purpose, it somehow is related to the flamethrower, or sonic protection for the driver, or whatever you want to make up, go for it. There you see how that top part turned out. I like those little standoffs in the back. I end up really doing little to weather them or anything because they just had a great detail to them. They look like little canisters, and it's funny when they're just ripped out of a motherboard. They're what holds the motherboard off the metal base of the case. And they're actually made into the PC board. You used to have screws at both ends that would hold them off. These were actually made into the board, and that even worked out. They had a better look. So I thought about when I was painting the casting, I thought about not painting the guns the green and just leaving the metal look, the original metal look. And I kind of kicked myself for not doing that. I did that with the flamethrower. The flamethrower I did not change the color of. I left those the bare metal, and then I do weather them slightly. And there's part of me that kind of kicks myself on this because it's like, you're trying to simulate a metal look on something that started out as metal. So if I had to think of anything on this build that if I went back now I would change, it would probably be that. Not that I'm not happy with it. And look at that thing. It's snorting at you through the guns. And there you see me painting the side of the light, which, it's facing forward. Trust me. Let's go with that. Wanted to bust out the pencils and use them for some highlights, even though I do end up using washes to cover a lot. But after doing the light colored pencils for highlights and a dark pencil to darken some areas like the back bumper, the bumper that's on the body itself, not the added bumper that I did. I darkened wheel wells. There you can see that. Darkened wheel wells and that kind of thing. And then I went over the casting with a flat clear again to seal those in. And you'll see that a few times where well, you won't see it, but I did it. I end up using flat clear at various stages just to seal in what's there up to that point. And then I proceed from that point forward. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters for making what you're seeing here available to me. I've been wanting to try some of the AK interactive washes, and fortunately, thanks to their support, I've been able to get some of those. And so there's a variety of them that you'll see me use. This one, as I recall, was engine grime that I'm using at that point. And it has an interesting look to it. It helped break up some of that flat black that I had sprayed on the casting, or on the cage area, cage and base. Their washes are really interesting. I really like the variety that they have. And there's a lot more than I have. I have a few of them, like 4 of them. This one's a light rust wash, as I recall. And to put it mildly, I absolutely love this wash, because it gives you a rust coloring so easily, ridiculously easily. And there's that transition between that plow and the body that when I get finished with the wash, it really made that connection look a lot more realistic. One of the things that was nice about that plow is, and I'm sure you noticed it, I didn't paint it at all, and I didn't scratch it up or anything. That's kid play. That is original Matchbox wear that, hey, the kid did a great job. He beat the hell out of that little Matchbox and made that thing look weathered. And I'd be a fool to try and recreate weathering that's real by painting it over and then trying to recreate that. So the scratches, the wear on the edges, that kind of thing, hey, it's perfect. I'm thrilled with it. I just added some rust. Well, and something else at the very end of the video. But again, you'll see if you hang around for that. Yeah, that light rust wash by AK Interactive, it's perfect. And for those of you who are, regretting that you're not seeing Gauzy in this build, Gauzy is made by AK Interactive. So indirectly, you got your Gauzy fix. Now this, interestingly enough, is AK's track wash. That I thought, what the heck? Let's put that on there. They have some really interesting washes. And again, between the track wash and the dark streaking grime, which is interesting, as I recall, this is dark streaking grime for green colors, which worked out great because, yep, this is green. And it allowed me to get a separation. I'm sure you noticed on the Toro Loco casting, that front half, it has a bowl look to it. I mean, cut into the casting itself. It's like fur, or fur's probably the wrong term, but it's actually has an animal look to it. And so it gave me a chance to separate out that kind of area from the rest of the casting. And so here we go with another wash. And this one I applied a little bit differently. I did end up going kind of heavy in areas. And then I used a Q-tip. I was trying to bring out that fur kind of look. I was really happy with how this worked out. And what's nice is if you take it off a little too heavy with the Q-tip, then you just add some more. And I think the thing I learned most in this build was it's nice to have a variety of washes. That, Nuln Oil isn't the end-all be-all to washes. It's fantastic, don't get me wrong. But, speaking of Nuln Oil, I end up using it again on the wheels. As you see me dusting them here, I end up cutting the areas that are a little heavy in the dusting with Nuln Oil. And I hope I didn't cut that chunk out. If I did, oh no, here it comes. Yeah, there's the Nuln Oil. So if the dusting got a little too light, I just would darken it back up with the Nuln Oil, and then I'd redust it. So that's pretty much the story. Here's where we started. And here's the BFT. And that's not what you think it means. I'll explain later. I hope you enjoy this build. There's some still shots coming up as well. I hope everybody enjoyed this 3 Blind Mice Gaslands group invitational. I can't wait to see the other builds. Please check them out. Check out the 3 Blind Mice Diecast channel on YouTube. And there should be a lot of really great builds. I can't wait to see them. Thanks also to my Patreon supporters. Again, I really do appreciate your help. Look at the flamethrower back there. You see how I weathered it, but it's still the original metal. I love that picture. But I'm a little biased. I built the darn thing. Anyhow, thank you for watching these videos. Thank you for putting up with me. And this is a lot of fun. If you've never done a Gaslands build, you gotta give it a try. To say they're a kick in the pants is truly putting it mildly. You can just kind of let your imagination run on these things. So, thanks again. Everybody stay safe and healthy out there. And you might want to stick around to the end of the video, because always keep in mind when we do these, they're toys. We're supposed to have fun doing these things. We're supposed to have fun with these things. So everybody, have fun. Thanks again to my Patreon supporters. Catch you in the next one.
Well.